Good evening, and welcome to our second reading of our Love Letters from Jesus Bible Stories session. We have 6 more stories to read tonight, and then you get to write a letter of your own. This one is called The Team of 12. Have you ever been hunting for treasure? When Jesus was all grown up, he went hunting for treasure, but he wasn't looking for treasure that sparkles, and he wasn't looking for treasure that glitters. He was looking for people. Jesus needed people who would follow him and help him tell the world about God. Now, if he could find those people, that would be like finding treasure. The first place Jesus looked for treasure was at the beach. There, on the shore, he found 2 fishermen. "Hello, Peter," Jesus said. "Hello, Andrew." He already knew their names. "Will you follow me? Will you do what I do and help me tell the world about God?" "Yes," Peter said. "Yes," Andrew said. And right away they dropped their nets and followed Jesus. "Hurrah," Jesus thought. "I have found some treasure." The next day, Jesus saw Matthew sitting at the market counting his money. "I wonder if he will say yes," Jesus thought. And so he asked him. "Hello, Matthew," Jesus said. "Will you follow me? Will you do what I do and help me tell the world about God?" "Yes," Matthew said, and right away Matthew dropped his money and followed Jesus. "Hurrah," Jesus thought, "I have found more treasure." And so it went. Every day Jesus looked for more people who would follow him, and every day somebody said yes. How happy Jesus was when he had found his team of 12. They were his first disciples. That team of 12 really was the best treasure that Jesus had ever found. Dear children of First Lutheran, did you know Jesus wants you to be a part of his team? His team is the best team you could ever join because Jesus is in charge. And you would be so good at following him and helping him tell the world about me. Will you say yes to Jesus if you will be a part of his team? That will make Jesus and me so happy. And more than that, you will be like treasure to him. In fact, you will be one of the very best treasures Jesus has ever found. With lots of love, God. I wonder what our next story is. This one is called Wind and Waves. It was a beautiful day on Lake Galilee. Golden sunlight danced on the water. A gentle breeze whispered softly in the air. Small waves rippled quietly across the water. In the little boat, the disciples rested after a busy day's work. Jesus put his head on a comfy cushion and closed his eyes, and all was peaceful and quiet and calm. Then, as if from nowhere, gray clouds marched across the sky and pushed the sun out of the way. The gentle breeze turned into a mighty rushing wind. Those small, rippling waves became big, bouncing waters. And in the little boat, the disciples were scared. What was happening? An enormous clap of thunder boomed above, and the heavens opened as a bolt of lightning streaked down toward the little boat. Now the disciples were terrified. Their little boat rocked up and down as mighty waves jumped over the deck. They were going to drown. Where was Jesus? He surely could save them. Above the noise of the storm, the disciples thought they heard another, quieter sound. That couldn't possibly be the sound of someone snoring, could it? But it was. Jesus was fast asleep on that comfy cushion, and he was snoring while that mighty storm was raging all around them. "Jesus, Jesus," the disciples cried, "save us, save us." Jesus woke up, stood in that little boat, and held out his hand above the raging waters, and he said 2 tiny words, "Be still." And an amazing thing happened. Those crashing and thundering waters became small waves again. Those great gray clouds scurried away and the sun slid back where it belonged. The storm had stopped. The disciples were amazed. Who was this man who could calm the wind and stop the waves? This man was Jesus, the Son of God. Dear children of First Lutheran, wow, how scary for those disciples to be in that little boat in the middle of a storm. Are you ever afraid of storms, or of the dark, or of being alone? Do you remember in that story how Jesus held out his hand over the water? If you ever are scared, I want you to imagine Jesus holding out his hand to you. Even though his hand might be invisible, it will still be right there, holding on to yours. He will hold tight and never let go. When you are afraid, remember, Jesus will be holding your hand. Love, God. And here we have the little boat and the seas and the clouds and the lightning. I wonder what our next story could be about. This one is called The Little Lost Lamb. There once was a good shepherd who had about 100 sheep. That's a lot of sheep. He loved each of his sheep very much, and he knew all of their names. Every day he would lead them to green pastures where they could eat the best fresh grass. On their way home, he would lead them to still, cool waters where they could drink. Every evening at bedtime, the good shepherd would count his sheep to make sure they were all safely in their pen. One night, the shepherd began to count his sheep. 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. Oh no! Little Fluffy was missing. Now what do you suppose the Good Shepherd did? Did he lie down and go to sleep, hoping that Fluffy would come back the next day? No. Did he say to himself, "Oh well, never mind, I still have 99 sheep"? No. Did he sit down and cry? Not a chance. He got right up and he went out to search for his little lost lamb. That good shepherd marched through the meadows, hiked over the hills, and splashed through the streams. He burrowed under bushes, thrashed through the thicket, and fought his way around the forest, shouting, "Fluffy, Fluffy, where are you?" And then he heard the faintest little "ba, ba." "Fluffy," the shepherd cried as he happily scooped her up in his arms, "I'm so glad I found you." And with his heart full of love, the good shepherd lifted her ever so gently, put her high on his shoulders, and carried her carefully all the way back home. Fluffy nuzzled her head into his warm, strong shoulder and decided that she would never, ever leave the Good Shepherd again. Dear children of First Lutheran, did you know Jesus is just like that Good Shepherd? Did you know that you are just like one of his sheep? Jesus loves you so much that he never, ever wants you to leave him. But even if you do, remember that Jesus will search high and low for you and never give up until he finds you. And when he does, with a heart full of love, he will bring you back home with him forever. Love always, God. We have the nighttime and the mountains and the meadows. And look, it's Fluffy and the Good Shepherd. Our next story is called Remember Me. And this story is the start of our Holy Week journey that leads up until Easter. Jesus sat and looked at the long table where he would eat supper with his disciples. A lovely large loaf of warm, crusty bread sat in the middle of the table. It filled the whole room with a delicious smell, and next to it stood a tall pitcher filled to the brim with fresh, cool wine. Everything was ready. Jesus looked at his precious team of 12 disciples as they sat around the table. They had been so good to him. They had followed Jesus wherever he went. They had told so many people about God, and Jesus was going to miss them a lot. Jesus knew that he had nearly finished his work on earth. Jesus knew that even though he had done nothing wrong, there were still some people who hated him. And Jesus knew that soon those same people would hang him on a big, heavy wooden cross and leave him there to die. But although Jesus felt sad about that, he felt happy that he would be able to show so many people just how much God loved them. Jesus would never forget how God helped him feed 5,000 people. He would never forget how God helped him calm a great big storm on Lake Galilee. And most of all, Jesus would never forget his wonderful disciples. But would his disciples forget him? Jesus didn't want that. So he decided to make their Last Supper together very special. Jesus picked up that warm, crusty loaf, broke it, and gave a piece to each of his disciples. And as they ate it, Jesus softly whispered, "Whenever you eat some bread, I want you to remember me." Then Jesus picked up that tall pitcher of wine and poured out some for each of his disciples. And as they each took a sip, Jesus softly whispered, "Whenever you have a drink, I want you to remember me." What a special supper. After that, every time those disciples ate some bread, guess who they remembered? Jesus. And every time they had a drink, guess who they remembered? Jesus. Those disciples never forgot Jesus, and Jesus never, ever forgot them. Dear children of First Lutheran, did you know that all around the world there are people who still share in that special supper just like the disciples and Jesus did? It's called communion. Don't we celebrate that? Communion is a wonderful time when we eat bread and we drink wine to remember Jesus. And so, if you ever share in communion, be sure to remember my son Jesus, because guess what? He will be remembering you, just like Jesus never, ever forgot his precious disciples. He has promised to never, ever forget you. With so much love, God. And we have Jesus and all of his disciples. This story is called The Saddest Day. Jesus was sad and scared and lonely and tired. He slowly carried his big, heavy wooden cross up to the top of the hill. And when he reached the top, the soldiers took that big, heavy wooden cross and nailed him to it. They hammered nails through his hands, and they hammered nails through his feet, and they laughed at him and called him names. They lifted that big, heavy wooden cross, and they stood it up and left him to hang there. Suddenly, the birds stopped singing. The sun stopped shining. The flowers hung their heads, and darkness crept in without a sound and covered the world in its deep, silent shadow. Jesus closed his eyes, and then with a roar, the whole earth shook. The mighty mountains trembled, and God's tears fell like raindrops from the sky. It was that day that his son, the one and only Jesus, died. Dear children of First Lutheran, the day my son died was the saddest day I can remember. But shall I tell you a secret? That was not the end of Jesus. The day he died was not the end of the story. This story has a very happy ending, and I love happy endings, don't you? So turn the page to find out what happened next, and you will hardly be able to believe it. Your excited friend, God. Here we have Jesus with his big cross and hanging from it. But I think we should see what the very exciting ending is. 3 days later, the early morning sun tried to peek through the clouds as Jesus' friend Mary came up the hillside to put perfume on Jesus' body. Quietly, she tiptoed up to the big cave where they had buried him, and suddenly she stopped. Something was wrong. The great big stone that had covered the doorway was gone. Who could have moved that heavy stone? Mary slowly peered inside the dark cave, and she could not believe what she saw. Jesus was gone. Who had taken his body? Where had they put him? Mary began to cry, but then she heard a voice behind her. "Why are you crying?" a man asked. "Oh, please, sir," Mary sobbed. "Are you the gardener? Someone has taken my Jesus away. If you know where he is, can you tell me?" "Mary," the man whispered, and Mary's heart skipped a beat. How did this man know who she was? How could this voice sound so much like Jesus as he softly whispered her name? Mary blinked through her tears at the man standing in front of her. Could it really be true? Was this man Jesus? Was Jesus alive again? And suddenly she knew it was him. The sun jumped out from behind the clouds. The birds began to sing, and the flowers in the fields lifted their heads as they danced in the wind. The whole earth seemed to shout his name. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus was alive. And from the heavens up above came the sound of 1,000 angels singing. 1,000 angels singing to welcome back Jesus. Jesus, the King of the world. Mary's heart sang for joy. If Jesus could live again, even after he had died, that meant one day Mary could live again too. And if Jesus would have a new home in heaven, that meant one day Mary would have a new heaven and home too. And with a hop and a skip and a jump, Mary ran to tell the disciples Jesus was alive. Jesus was alive, and one day, one wonderful day, Mary would be able to live in heaven with Jesus forever. Dear children of First Lutheran, are you smiling now like I am? That was really a happy ending, wasn't it? Jesus came back to life. And do you know where Jesus is now? He's in heaven, the most wonderful home there is. That's where Mary is too. Heaven is a home where there is no crying and no sadness. Heaven is a home where there is nothing to be afraid of and nothing can hurt you. Heaven is a home where there is only happiness, love, laughter, and joy. And the most amazing part of this whole story is that heaven can be your home too, where one wonderful day you can live with Jesus forever. I love you very much, God. And there's Jesus and Mary. And that is the end of our stories, our love letters from God. And so now I invite all of you should have all received an invitation in the mail just like this, that invites you to please write your own love letter to God and to read it out loud and have your parents videotape you and send it to me, Miss Morgan, at worship@firstgeneseo.org by this coming Friday so that we can use it to tell our own very special love story for the congregation. Thank you so much,